A 21-verse blast flips the map, exposes a nation's pride carved in red stone, and calls out a family betrayal so raw that the echo still stings. Obadiah does not whisper. It detonates. A prophetic flare fired into the night, locked on a target that thought altitude meant immunity. One short scroll, one relentless theme. The arrogance of Edom collapses under the weight of justice, and the verdict tosses sparks onto the whole world. Picture the high ridges of Mount Seir, the southeastern spine of the Dead Sea. Sheer red sandstone rises like fortressed waves. Narrow chasms corkscrew to secret plateaus. Strongholds cut directly into rock. The trade road hums below. Frankincense, copper, spices, textiles, caravans zigzagging the king's highway. Above it all, Edom lounges with a view that tricks the heart. High ground, hidden paths, cliffs within cliffs, and caverns that breathe heat like dragon throats. The name Edom bears the color of the landscape, red. The old story chases it. Esau, ruddy, a stew the color of earth, and a lineage that chose the mountains. In this landscape, Obadiah steps forward with a vision, a flash memoir of divine judgment, compressed to a blade. The first words peel back air cover. A rumor from the Lord. Messengers summoned among the nations. A coalition rising. Edom's ears would have heard the drumbeat in those opening lines. A nation that bathed in altitude hears heaven calling ground troops. The prophecy lands with that frightening precision only prophets know. No wasted strokes. No polite hedging. I will make you small among the nations. You shall be utterly despised. The target lies exposed by a single diagnosis. Pride. The pride runs on a specific fuel. You who live in the clefts of the rock, whose dwelling is lofty, saying in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? Edom's confidence grows in caverns and crags. Eagles nest on ledges that human feet barely reach. Caravan royalties pay for protection. Copper furnaces roar in the desert outside Timnah and Wadi Finan, casting black mounds of ancient slag. Even Assyrian scribes once wrote the names of Edom's kings in their victory lists. Tribute paying, yes, but still counted in the roll of nations. Udumu, Edom, a name that made it to the clay prisms of emperors. Their deity, cows, flown on banners, carved on seals. Alliances added shimmer. Geography added armor. Pride settled like sand in the lungs. Obadiah slices that illusion. Though you soar like the eagle, and though your nest is set among the stars, from there I will bring you down. The higher the cliff, the harder the drop. The imagery is brutal in its clarity. Theft usually leaves scraps. Grape pickers leave gleanings on the vines. Thieves take what they can carry and scatter in the night. But when Edom's fall comes, nothing gets left on the table. Allies turn. Agreements snap. Banqueting companions pivot into saboteurs. Edom's wise men, Teman's proud academics and counselors, go silent. The glossary of security goes page by page into fire. Every line carries a memory deeper than mountains. The wound predates any city, any watchtower. It tracks back to a tent in Genesis, to brothers and a birthright, to Jacob and Esau, to a stew and a blessing that detonated a household. The jostling in Rebekah's womb turns into a nation locked into a long, grim stare. The pages following Genesis keep stepping around that fracture. Numbers shows Edom refusing Israel passage. Saul and David fight Edom. Kings rise and fall. Edom rebels under Jehoram. The story appears again and again, like a warning light no king can switch off. By Obadiah's time, the light turns siren. The siren howls loudest in 586 BCE. Nebuchadnezzar II's machines grind against Jerusalem. Siege ramps rise like artificial mountains. Gates splinter. Fire leaps from house to house. The city collapses after years of defiance. First deportation in 597 BCE, then the last stand ending in 596. What Obadiah describes in verses 10 through 14 reads like someone standing in the alley while it happens. Edom does not just watch. They clap and smirk. They cross the line from spectator to collaborator. They enter the gates of Jerusalem's ruin. They help themselves to the spoils. They block escape routes in the wadis. They cut down fugitives. They deliver survivors to the conquerors. The charge sheet contains escalating verbs, an indictment rising step by step toward its verdict. Other prophets draw the same outline in blood-red ink. Psalm 137 remembers Edom's shout at the city's fall. Tear it down, down to its foundations. Lamentations points a trembling finger. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, soon turns to, the cup shall pass to you. Ezekiel 35 paints Mount Seir drunk on perpetual enmity, a grudge fossilized into policy. Jeremiah 49 launches a near-parallel oracle to Obadiah, using lines that lock together phrase for phrase. The ancient world kept receipts. Even Judah's dispatches recorded the threat. Arad Ostrakon 24, a Hebrew letter written on a potsherd around the turn of the 6th century BCE, warns of Edom on the move. The picture forms with hard lines. A brother nation stepped over bodies to take advantage. Obadiah answers this with one of the barest equations in prophecy. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deed shall return on your own head. The line is not a metaphor. It is a fulcrum, and what sits on it is the world. The next sentence explodes the horizon. The day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. What began as a local audit turns global. Edom becomes Exhibit A in the court of heaven. The case becomes precedent. Anyone who builds a nest on a cliff of contempt stands on the same ledge. The shock lands harder when Obadiah names the brains of Edom. Will I not on that day destroy the wise men out of Edom and understanding out of Mount Esau? Teman prided itself on sages. The biblical world even treats a Temanite as a byword for counsel. Job's friend Eliphaz comes from there. Teman's heritage whispers about edicts carved with reason and seasoned advice. Edom banked on that mind trust. They had mountains and they had mines. In Obadiah's vision, both fail. The military pride takes a blow just as sharp. Your mighty men shall be dismayed, O Teman. The canyon ambushes, the narrowing passes, the scouts, the clifftop snipers, everything that made Edom a nightmare to invade, burns in a single sentence. Invincibility turns into a trap. Even the feasting tables where treaties were signed betray them. Those who eat your bread have set a trap beneath you. Banquets in the ancient Near East, sealed agreements. Bread and salt-made covenants feel like iron. Obadiah calls those tables minefields. This prophecy is not guessing. It is naming tides. After 586, Edom's fortunes rise briefly. They drift west into the vacated Negev and the southern Judean hill country. The name shifts into Idumea under the Persians and Greeks. The map redraws. The highlands of Seir slowly empty of Edomite power. A new people, the Nabateans, Arab traders turned empire builders, ride in with their own cliff-carved genius. The city, most tourists call Petra, likely biblical Silla, becomes the crown of a different nation by the 4th century BCE. Edom's ancestral ridges host another throne. The biblical timeline stitches the outcome. Malachi 1-4, dated late 5th century BCE, shows Edom's attempt to rebuild. The line falls with finality. They shall build, but I will throw down. Centuries later, under the Hasmoneans, John Hyrcanus compels the Idumeans to adopt Judean law and circumcision around 125 BCE, effectively absorbing them. Herod the Great, crowned by Rome, rises from that Idumean line and builds with a fever that astounds archaeologists to this day. Palaces at Jericho, towers, a temple expansion that dwarfs all earlier platforms. Yet Herod's kingdom, for all its marble, serves as a client regime and dies with Rome's fires, while the memory of Edom, as an independent highland people, dissolves. Pride wore red. History dyed it out. Obadiah does not only point to falls. It maps how judgment behaves. The prophets refuse to separate cruelty from outcomes. In the day of your brother's disaster, Obadiah writes, you stood aloof. Then Obadiah rehearses a ladder of crimes, looking with glee, speaking with arrogance, entering gates uninvited, looting wealth, cutting down escapees, handing survivors to the blade. Each rung climbs toward a single truth. Neutrality in the face of a brother's devastation converts to violence. Standing by at a crossroads becomes participation. There is no man's land where compassion is optional and consequence light. The artistry of the language sharpens the blade. The Hebrew phrases stack repetitions that roll like drum beats. Do not look, do not rejoice, do not boast, do not enter, do not loot, do not stand, do not hand over. A list that hammers a conscience. Even the metaphors carry precision. Thieves do not strip a house bare. Grape gatherers always leave leftovers. But Edom's ruin comes like someone who does not know the word enough. When judgment ripens, it arrives without nibbling. It eats the whole fruit. Other prophets fold into this pattern. Amos names Edom's relentless fury and insatiable wrath. Jeremiah aligns line for line with Obadiah's sentences, leading scholars to see shared tradition or literary borrowing. The dating of Obadiah lands, for most, in the aftermath of 586, precisely because of how closely it hugs Jerusalem's demolition. A minority viewpoint places the event earlier, around 845 BCE, when Philistines and Arabians raided Jerusalem during King Jehoram's reign, and Edom revolted, as in 2 Chronicles 21. The charge sheet of Obadiah fits the 6th century with a tighter glove. Fugitives captured, plundered gates, gloating nations, especially given the witness of Psalm 137 and Lamentations. The cliff face remains the same. The decade on the calendar changes the valley light. Panning out, the fame of Edom's mountains hums under everything. Their land commanded choke points on the king's highway, the trade conveyor belt from Arabia to Damascus and beyond. Frankincense and myrrh perfumed these air currents. The Wadi Araba to their west offered copper, a metal that powered tools and weapons across the Iron Age. The massive slag heaps at Timnah and Fanan tell of an industrial effort that chewed centuries and spat black glassy hills. Strata there show labor reorganization and supply chain control, maturing into a polity that looked like a kingdom before some ever thought it possible. The debate among archaeologists over dates cools as radiocarbon layers settle, pointing to a sophisticated Edom forming around the 10th to 9th centuries BCE, and then booming under Assyrian hegemony. Their god coast stamped their identity like a brand, appearing on personal names and seals. Those seals did not prevent betrayal. Assyrian annals collected vassals like trophies, listing kings who paid in gold, timber, and sweat. The clay prism of Sennacherib, that royal cylinder still legible in museum glass, counts Kausmalika of Edom among the kings who brought tribute after the 701 BCE campaign. Edom wheeled and dealt to survive superpowers. The habit of dining with stronger empires hardened. Prophecy weaponizes that habit against them. Those who eat your bread set a trap beneath you. The table of survival flips into a snare. Obadiah's middle section stands like a camera planted at the city gate of Jerusalem. The prophet replays Edom's conduct on the worst day Judah ever saw. Smoke curls in the text. On the day that strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates. Babylonians push into courtyards. Chariots roll over crushed thresholds. Edom does not protest. They waltz into what is not theirs. This is not rumor. The psalmist, sitting in exile by the rivers of Babylon, will not forget that Edomite chant. Bring it down. Bring it down. Grief turns into a ledger, and Obadiah writes line items with the precision of an accountant. The moral here cuts with surgical neatness. Edom's crime gets framed as violence because of your violence against your brother Jacob. The word violence, chamas in Hebrew, carries weight. It is not merely physical force, it names harm that violates covenantal bonds. Brotherhood amplifies the wrong. The old stories do not disappear behind distant genealogies. The God of Israel holds nations to the responsibilities of kin. From Cain and Abel forward, blood has a voice. The way Edom treated refugees, blocking mountain paths, intercepting runners in ravines, turning the desperate back toward the sword, registers as betrayal at the family level. Then the prophecy turns the camera again, from the gate to the globe. The day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. A global day enters a local valley. The sentence after that shifts grammar in a way that should slow every heartbeat. As you have drunk on my holy mountain, so all the nations shall drink continually. The picture of Edom celebrating on Zion's ruin, drinking on sacred ground, becomes a lens for the entire world. Every goblet lifted in cruelty becomes a cup returned. The payback is not petty. It is structural. Actions do not evaporate in ancient Israel's imagination. They ferment and pour back. The answer to that fermentation stands on another mountain. In Zion, the words read like granite. In Mount Zion there shall be those who escape, and it shall be holy. The remnant notion glows. The sanctity of the hill returns like a sunrise after arson. The house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. The dispossessed do not stay dispossessed. The next image rips through the paper. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau stubble. The metaphor collapses long war into a spark and a pile of dry straw. The house of Esau kindling in the face of a furnace. Not obliteration for its own sake. Purification of a moral order that refuses to let gloating stand. The map then unrolls. Obadiah names directions with cartographer clarity. The Negev, the southern deserts of Judah, shall possess Mount Esau. The Shephelah, the lowland of Judean foothills, shall possess Philistia. The tribes press back into burned territory. The fields of Ephraim and the fields of Samaria, north, return under Judah's hand, a reversal of civil war division. Benjamin stretches into Gilead across the Jordan. Exiles return. Not just any exiles. A group from Sepharad returns to possess the cities of the Negev. Sepharad later becomes the name Spanish Jews give their diaspora. In Obadiah, it most likely points to Sardis in Lydia, western Anatolia, under the umbrella of Persian rule. The prophecy claims a homecoming massive enough to cover scattered coordinates across an empire. The last verse draws everything tight. Deliverers shall go up to Mount Zion to judge the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. The word deliverers, sometimes rendered saviors, recalls the era of the judges, where local leaders rose to rescue and restore justice. They ascend not to gloat, but to govern. Judgment lands as administration, not mere sentiment. The final clause drops the mic. The kingdom shall be the Lord's. All the leverage of geography, all the treaties and cliffs, all the steel of chariots, bows, and copper ingots, bow to that sentence. Dominion under covenant beats dominion by cleft and canyon. Something unspoken haunts that last line. The prophets know what empires forget. Altitude without ethics drops into ravines. Alliances built only for advantage flip like rugs. Wisdom divorcing truth shrivels. The wise men of Teman lose their compass the moment their counsel props up plunder. The mighty men crumble the instant their confidence stands on a cliff of contempt. The shortness of Obadiah's scroll intensifies this witness. No digressions. No labyrinthine visions. Straight justice, land by land, brother by brother, gate by gate. Even the literary structure enforces that focus. 15 verses of indictment and doom, then a compact restoration map, then the kingdom declaration. The book starts with pride and ends with God's reign. That is not a random arc. It is the tension line between counterfeit altitude and the real thing. The counterfeit makes its nest in rock and thinks height equals right. The real height descends in righteousness and judges mountains by a higher mountain. The archaeology cooperates. Copper production around the Wadi Finance shows centralization that bespeaks strong leadership. Fortifications control plateaus and passes. Egyptian and Assyrian texts alike note regional players scrabbling for position under superpower pressure. The absence of Edom in later classical lists as a sovereign highland state aligns with the biblical forecast. Edomian usage grows in the West. Ancient Hebrew letters warn of Edom. Then the warnings fade as names change. On the ground, in crumbled watchtowers and slag seas, the picture matches the scroll. A power proud of its rocks becomes a people adrift among new rocks. The moral architecture holds even after the terrain vanishes under new flags. Greco-Roman texts speak of Idumea, not Edom. Josephus, the 1st-century Jewish historian, writes about Idumeans in the turmoil of the Roman wars. John Hyrcanus's forced conversions still reverberate in those pages. Herod's extravagant buildings point to a different kind of mountain, man-made plateaus that pretend to eternity. Masada, Herodium, the temple platform, stone mountains built by engineers. Those mountains keep their outlines, but the people who built them pass under the names of conquerors. Pride copies itself in hard materials, then softens under time. Obadiah's target is not only Edomite granite, it is human granite. The text uses Edom as a parable with coordinates. Pride nestles in rugged self-sufficiency. Gloating watches a rival stumble and turns the stumble into a spectacle. Neutrality, when justice bleeds on the road, registers as a choice. The prophet's verbs refuse to graduate into abstractions. They stay at the city gate, the alley, the crossroads. The guilt counts in boots and footprints. In footprints turned sideways to block fleeing feet. The imagery of grape pickers and thieves contains a second strike. Torah law insisted on leaving gleanings for the poor and the foreigner. The biblical imagination sets aside leftovers as a sign of covenant generosity. Obadiah's claim that enemies will strip Edom to the bone names a total deprivation. It is the opposite of gleaning, a curse in the exact size of Edom's sin. Edom blocked gleanings of mercy at the crossroads. Now Edom will know no gleanings of mercy when enemies come through its doors. Even smaller details carry weight. The phrase, "those who eat your bread," is more than mealtime gossip. Bread in the ancient world sealed loyalty. Salt shared across a table bound obligations. An ally violating table law commits a sacrilege on a human scale. Obadiah leans on that to pronounce the shape of Edom's end. The very sacraments of their survival become weapons against them. The text keeps a slow burn for its finale. The territory claims in verses 19 to 20 read, like a ledger cut with a cartographer's knife. People from the Negev, southern Judah, taking Mount Esau. People from the Shephelah, those low hills rolling west, taking Philistine cities. The territories north and east, Ephraim and Samaria to the north, Gilead beyond Jordan, switch hands back under Judah's claim. The language is older than national borders on modern maps, but the instinct remains. Dispossession reverses under holy custody. The list of captives from this Canaanite region and that fortress town finds their seats again. The exiles return even from distant Sepharad, likely Sardis, that Lydian stronghold in Anatolia known from Persian-era records, coming back to inhabit the Negev cities. The diaspora suffers no amnesia in Obadiah's imagination. The punch lands with pristine simplicity at the end. Deliverers climb. Mountains submit to judgment. The kingdom belongs to the Lord. The writer makes no mention of horns, beasts, sevens, or seals. No cosmic menagerie. Just a theorem. National pride plus betrayal burns into ash. Remnant plus righteousness repopulates ruins. Sovereign justice seals it all. Scholars parse the textual overlaps with Jeremiah 49:7-22 carefully. The borrowings look close enough to suggest common sources, or one quoting the other. Either way, the tradition compresses around fixed points. Edom's cleverness, Edom's allies, Edom's geography, and Edom's gloating at Jerusalem's destruction. That convergence anchors Obadiah historically and ethically. The rhetoric belongs to a people who have watched their city burn and their neighbor clap. Comparative sources deepen the picture. Assyrian documents place Edom in the roster of kings who knew when to bend. Babylonian policy made use of regional resentments to destabilize Judah's resistance. The book of Ezekiel accuses Edom of claiming Judah's land as a prize. Archaeological surveys in southern Judah and the Negev show increasing activity under Edomite and then Idumean hands after 586, the kind of movements that a prophet might see as illegal occupancy or opportunistic annexation. Inscriptions from Arad, Lachish, and elsewhere in Judah speak of tense border management in the years before the fall. None of that saves Edom from oblivion. Relying on empire wins breaks a spine in the long run. A compelling irony floats over later centuries, and Herod the Great, the most famous Idumean, ends up patron of a temple expansion that sits on Mount Zion's ridge, the very mountain Obadiah says will host deliverers. His builders move earth like gods, doubling the platform, wrapping it in stone courses that tourists still touch. Yet the narrative arcs past him. Rome's eagles, those new birds of height and empire, pull down what he built within a few generations. The prophetic word about God's kingdom outlasting cliffs and courts cannot be buried in rubble. Modern maps whisper the same warning in 1,000 vignettes. Alliances signed at candlelit tables collapse under smoke. Pride organizes itself with cliffs of capital and concrete. Neutrality at crossroads returns as consequence in tribunals and headlines. The old words turn new at each betrayal. Do not gloat. Do not rejoice, do not boast, do not enter, do not loot, do not stand, do not hand over. There is a consistency that breathes. Edom gives the shape. Humanity supplies the dates. The literary artistry deserves its own gaze. Obadiah's first half uses chiasm-like symmetry, moving from Edom's pride and supposed height, 1-4, to total plunder, 5-6. To betrayal by allies, 7, to destruction of wisdom and might, 8-9. Then the crimes, 10-14, stand like parallel lines marching forward. The shift at 15 to the day of the Lord upends the focus and makes Edom a representative symbol. The closing, 17-21, reverses the dispossession and crowns the vision with divine kingship. The symmetry bristles with intention. The structure of the book maps the moral structure of reality as the prophet sees it. Language play supports the movement. The root for high and pride works as a pun, tying Edom's geography to their sin. The word for clefts and rock dwellings nods to Sela, rock, a place name connected to the highlands, later known as Petra. The names Teman and Bozrah carry history in their vowels. Teman likely means south, but it became a metonym for Edomite wisdom and power. Bozrah appears in other oracles of judgment, becoming a lightning rod for divine justice against Edom. The text binds meaning to place in a way maps alone cannot. The phrase deliverers at the end pulls the past into the future. In the book of Judges, deliverers arise to rescue Israel from cycles of oppression. Obadiah's deliverers do something similar, but their ascent carries judicial weight. They do not simply strike and depart. They preside and restore. The final note exalts God's kingdom, which reframes deliverance as a sustained ordering under divine law, not merely episodic rescue missions. It also refuses to center vengeance. Judgment arrives as governance. Mountains, symbols of nations and powers, come under scrutiny and under structure. This vision does not sanitize hurt. The specificity of Edom's crimes refuses to blur the trauma of 586. The list survives as a record of tears and smoke. At the same time, Obadiah prevents the hurt from mutating into vigilantism. The measuring line belongs to the Lord. The result burns where injustice took root, not wherever pain points. That balance gives the book its authority. Cliffs and caverns did not intimidate it. Grief did not drown it. It holds the line and places the last word in the right mouth. In the end, Obadiah gives a muscle memory of justice. It recalls Genesis, sifts Kings and Chronicles, harmonizes with Jeremiah and Ezekiel, tunes itself to Malachi's coda, and then stands as a permanent chord run through the story. Pride on cliffs ends in a fall. Betrayal at the gate boomerangs. Refugees matter. The dispossessed receive their land again. Deliverers step onto Zion. The kingdom belongs to the Lord. These positions sit like fixed stars, not talking points. Edom's proud slogan lived in gravity-defying architecture. Homes hidden in rock cracks, watchposts unreachable except by goat or rope, galleries of stone opened by chisel and patience. Thereafter story moved west and blended into other names, to Idumea, then to footnotes in broader wars. Elevation without covenant trimmed itself into an anecdote. The wine cup passed back around. The fire caught stubble. Nothing accidental about any of it. Obadiah said it first, said it fast, and said it with the steel of a courtroom verdict. A lone Hebrew letter on a potsherd from Arad, a black sea of copper slag in the desert, a Babylonian siege ramp calcified into hillside rock, a line in a psalm half-choked by exile. Weigh them together, and they hum the same pitch as Obadiah. Pride drifted into collaboration with a conqueror. Collaboration descended into violence against a brother. Violence ricocheted. Then history placed Edom's heights under another people's feet. The book's brevity forces a reader to slow in places most skim. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Fits on a sticky note, and reaches into world courts and living rooms alike. Nations harvest what they sow. So do neighbors. Edom becomes a monarchy-sized parable for the moral laws that govern streets and states. Mount Zion becomes a symbol for restored order, not nationalist swagger. Its holiness reacquired its profile precisely by welcoming a remnant, not by crowning a warlord. The shock that this comes from the shortest Old Testament book only heightens the effect. 21 verses, no more. Enough for a blueprint of justice, a diagnosis of pride, a catalog of betrayal, a plan for homecoming, and a coronation line that refuses inflation. The prophet's name, Obadiah, servant of the Lord, echoes his method. No grand personal story, no royal genealogies. A servant carries a message, sets it down like a sealed letter on a king's desk, and leaves. The permanence belongs to the message. The conversation around dates often needles at people who want exactness. Obadiah's core concerns hold regardless. The 6th century reading aligns with the most text and cross-reference. The 9th century reading reflects another era where Jerusalem fell under raid, and Edom stood nearby, freshly rebellious against Judah. Both eras saw Edom prick Judah like a thorn. Obadiah's case requires the deeper cut, exemplified in 506. That is why later biblical voices keep calling Edom by name, as a moral warning rather than an antiquarian curiosity. Edom's red cliffs became a red flag for theology. The geography deserves a second look in the mind's eye. From the salt-rimmed Dead Sea southward, the Araba drops like a long crease, flanked by mountains. Mount Seir on the east lifts into a serrated wall. Water hides in clefts. A spring at Wadi Musa sweeps down to what became Petra. Royal tombs and facades, that coral and rose architecture modern lenses love, sprouted under later Nabatean hands. Edom's Selah likely occupied forms in the same geography. Less grand facade, more rugged stronghold, but equally couched in rock. The idea of a nest among stars made topographical sense. Obadiah did not scold from fantasy. He wrote from topographic realism. The link between name and color underscores the imagery. Edom means red. Seir names a hairy ruggedness in older etymologies. Esau's personal details, red and hairy, with a taste for the hunt, fused to a geography that wore the same palette. The stew for which Esau traded his birthright took its name from color Edom. These wordplays are not just puns. They trace identity through physical and spiritual landscapes. Pride dyed itself to match the cliffs. Covenant dyed itself to match holiness. The final flare from Obadiah lights not only Seir but every place that mistakes height for right. Enemies cutting down refugees at a pass still exist. Economies preying on ruins still multiply. Wisdom schools that coach arrogance still fill seats. Alliances that break covenant over a better deal still sip wine in cool caves. The book's measured brevity keeps this recognition close to the skin. It tells a whole truth in phrases compact enough to memorize. Deliverers ascending Zion punctuate this memory with action. Action under God's kingship is the anti-pride. The ascension in that final verse is not escape. It is engagement. The men and women in that line carry jurisdiction and scrolls, not loot and laughter. They take seat under law, not on a neighbor's couch as a raider. The heart of the scene beats with restoration rather than retribution, even though retribution has had its careful say. The theology, in a sentence, at the end, secures the whole. The kingdom shall be the Lord's. No qualifier, no compromise. That refrain ends prophets beyond Obadiah too. The landscape the prophets walk belongs to a God whose judgments are not mood swings, but mapped realities. Mountains come up under inspection, just like markets and families. Edom's name once looked like a mountain range. Now it looks like a file in a cosmic cabinet, labeled Case Law. A short tour of the book's internal rhythms marks out how Obadiah built that case law. He starts with a divine summons, formed as a messenger formula. We have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations. That formula ties Obadiah to broader prophetic tradition. He names the target. He announces a guaranteed outcome. He furnishes reasons. He produces forensic evidence. Crimes at the gate. He pronounces a sentence. He sketches how the sentence plays out on the ground. Territories regained. Finally, he codifies the principle under a single sovereign signature. Every part of that structure found echo in law courts across the ancient Levant. Prophets spoke in the cadence of covenant lawsuits. Words for violence are never cheap in Obadiah. He chooses chamas, for harm committed by one against another. Exactly the word used in Genesis to describe the world before the flood. Full of violence. The world saturated with violence could not go on untouched by judgment. Obadiah compresses that cosmic moral memory into a local event and then re-expands it. The day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. He reaches back to flood memory and forward to universal reckoning with an economy few writers ever pull off. Even the metaphor of fire and stubble resounds beyond a single hillside. Israel's prophetic tradition uses fire both to describe purification and to draw pictures of unquenchable judgment. In Obadiah, the conflagration is not random. Jacob and Joseph burn like a hearth. Esau, as stubble, disappears in that measured burn. Fire warms and refines in the house of Jacob. It also scorches what mocks it. Heat becomes justice. When the text turns to the exiles and their return, it refuses to coddle nostalgia. The returns are not merely to the old address. They are to holiness, coded onto land. Mount Zion anchors the holiness. The city's restored lines matter precisely because the city's devotion returns. The book welds geography to theology, without making either an idol. Land without holiness failed spectacularly under Edom's looting. Holiness without land floats. The restoration in Obadiah yokes the two without tightening into fanaticism. That balance has guided interpreters for centuries. The cultural memory of Sepharad, though a later Jewish application to Spain, nods at the diaspora by name. Obadiah's reach extends into exilic realities, where communities worship the God of Israel under foreign roofs. The promise of place lurks under prayers said in synagogues far from Zion. Even when those communities later claim names like Sephardic, their memory bank has Obadiah on its shelf. The real Sepharad of Obadiah likely meant Sardis, the spiritual Sepharad multiplied across seas. The precision of the word then and its reclamation later testified to the scroll's sticky impact on identity. By the time the prophet closes his scroll, Edom's cliffs look strangely fragile. The red rock remains, but the story changes. Jacob's house throws heat. Joseph's house throws flame. Esau's house smokes and disappears. The nations move onto center stage under the day of the Lord. Zion becomes a staircase for deliverers. The kingdom turns out not to be red or blue, iron or clay. It turns out to belong to the Lord. The shock for first hearers resounded for later ones. In a world that sorted winners by height, Obadiah measured worth by holiness. In an economy that prized clever alliances, Obadiah prized covenantal loyalty. In a culture that smiled at schadenfreude, Obadiah registered outrage. In a courtroom that typically salvaged scraps, Obadiah announced a clean sweep. Pride's obituary got written in less than a chapter. The humility embedded in the messenger's own name lingers. Obadiah is a servant delivering a king's justice. The scene invites imitation, quiet, precise, fearless. Pride finds ladders. Service finds stairs up Zion. Gloating finds gates of neighbors to pass through. Compassion finds crossroads to defend. Treachery gorges at banquets. Wisdom fasts to preserve integrity. The contrasts throb in the sentences. The view from Mount Seir at dusk still thrills the eye. It should. Creation's grandeur survives the sins committed upon it. The problem Obadiah names is not cliffs. It is the heart that thought cliffs guaranteed impunity. The climb into those clefts belongs back under the Lord's kingdom. When that order holds, even eagles overhead become metaphors of care rather than menace. Height ceases to be a weapon and returns to being a vantage from which to praise. The last echo of the scroll lingers on that throne's sentence. Many kings wrote, "The kingdom is mine," on walls and coins. The prophets never apologized for a counterclaim. This kingdom has a judge who remembers fugitives, a king who sees through banquets, a holy one who restores a hill by re-sanctifying it. The realm runs on measures that fit both war courts and village crossroads. The title deeds of lands belong under that signature. Obadiah's letter carried enough charge to close a circle begun in a tent where two boys wrangled in the womb. A small stew sold a birthright. A mountain-sized pride denied a brother refuge. A single sentence declared the end of it. A mountain of holiness restored order. A crown without edges closed the files. That is a complete story, stripped to iron and flame, splashed in the palette of red stone and golden dawn. Its warning stands in the present. Its comfort glows in the return. And its final clause sits on a throne no summit can reach or topple.